Welcome, Vega, to the IoT For All podcast. Thanks for being here again.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. This must be the fourth or fifth time.
At a minimum, an annual thing. At maybe a couple times, we've done it multiple times a year, depending on what's going on your end. So this is great.
Yeah, no, this is great. Great to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's for the audience who may be new to the podcast and not as familiar with you or what you all do. Can you give a quick introduction about yourself and the company?
Yeah, sure, sure. My name is Wienke Giezeman. I'm a CEO and co-founder from the Things Industries, and we are a company specializing in building network management software for LoRaWAN networks. LoRaWAN IoT networks, for the ones that don't know, are low power sensor IoT networks, mainly used to gather telemetry from condition monitoring, building monitoring, etc. And our focus is the network management software that allows other networks to be operated.
So I wanted to ask you, since you've kind of been at the forefront of the LoRaWAN adoption for many years now, what has surprised you the most about how the ecosystem has grown? Kind of where is the ecosystem now? Kind of how would you frame that for somebody?
I think what's really interesting if you look back at the last 10 years is that I think the core of its success that it was launched as an open technology. And this allowed a lot of different companies, a lot of different engineers, a lot of different developers to give a try at what they think is an interesting business niche for LoRaWAN. So we had operators adopting the technologies, building nationwide networks in their kind of like a cellular setting, utility companies, but also for building and local and private networks. And where you now, after 10 years, see like a significant traction is where LoRaWAN is used as private networks in buildings, for even for smart metering in cities, and where there's been this very big ecosystem of devices off the shelf available, gateways off the shelf available, and it's now really grown to a technology where a integrator can grab the components and build a solution very fast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the big things that's helped just kind of increase adoption and just help this space grow pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think it's also made it very flexible. It's an IoT technology that not from the start on was married to a certain implementation, a certain business model. When it was launched by the LoRa Alliance 10 years ago, when we joined, and that really helped a lot, and that also kept the technology agile because initially, the hypothesis was that it was being run by operators, the LoRaWAN network, and it was a competitor for something like Narrowband IoT. And now, yeah, a lot of people that are in LoRaWAN space, they don't even realize that that was actually the initial idea, because they see it so successful in buildings or in smart cities, or in retail or in restaurants or in farms. It's really become a really good private network technology.
So one of the things that I think you said, or maybe or kind of have mentioned it before, is there's really no alternative for enterprise IoT like LoRaWAN. Can you kind of unpack that for us? Like, what does that mean exactly, and how does that kind of play into the overall, I guess, scope of things when it comes to the connectivity options that are out in the market?
So it's pretty bold statement. What we see kind of with our enterprise customers is that what's really enticing is the fact that it's a really large off the shelf device maker ecosystem. And actually, there's a large amount of companies that if you want to have a custom device, they can also help you out. So we already have 300 device maker partners that together have around 1,500 different LoRaWAN devices. And that's really interesting, because in the end, the risk of an IoT project is really significantly higher when you have to make your own hardware. So I think that's really one. And the other one, of course, the long range capability and the sensitivity of the radio. That's really good in buildings. Yes, you have to build a set of multiple gateways, but definitely within buildings, that's very strong. So yeah, that's really basically two characteristics that make it a really good competitor.
Absolutely. So when enterprises are evaluating connectivity options like, let's see, NB-IoT, LTE-M, Wi-Fi, you name it, where does LoRaWAN basically shine the most? Where is it maybe the best fit? I obviously you talked about buildings, indoors, which makes a ton of sense. But just how would you kind of scope that out? If I'm thinking about my deployment, trying to figure out the best connectivity option, how do I know that LoRaWAN's kind of the option for me, or what characteristics kind of set it up for set the environment up for me to know that this is where I need to prioritize kind of the connectivity option for us.
Yeah. So LoRaWAN, of course, plays in the battery operated devices. So it's like really cutting telemetry from your building or from your operations. So this is really where it plays out and where it can last on the battery for very long. So think about a restaurant that's gonna do all kinds of facility management, metrics, fridges, toilets, soap dispensers, maybe even like monitoring the seats and the availability. All kinds of use cases there. But for instance, in a building as well as like energy sub metering, or for instance, light Legionella procedure auditing or compliance. So if you have a large building, you have to flush the warm water pipes once in a while. You want to check that, and you don't want to check that manually. There are a lot of these kind of small things that were small sensors you can drive an operational efficiency. And uh, it's a bit of a bold statement, as I says, like this is the technology. Um, I, I think what we've come to a level of maturity in the market where we can all say as providers, there's no superior technology. There's just a problem and a solution. And I think if you look in a building, there's a lot of IoT here. So even if you would here in this building listen to Bluetooth. You see a lot of Bluetooth mesh here because maybe that works. Maybe wireless MBus works. Of course, Wi-Fi. You have access control that's just ultra wideband, and most of them are using additional proprietary RF technology. So I think you really have to look at that's a kind of like doesn't like where does LoRaWAN as a technology come in? I think we're beyond that. It's like where does LoRaWAN as an ecosystem come in? And I think this is really where the value proposition is.
Would you say there are still elements of LoRaWAN that are maybe misunderstood, like aspects of LoRaWAN that are misunderstood by enterprise decision makers when it gets brought up in conversation, or things that maybe they kind of view as challenges that are maybe not correct? Anything kind of along those lines that's worth kind of setting the record straight on?
Yeah, so as I said, like initially, LoRaWAN was launched as an operator technology, and that didn't really catch on. So there's not a lot of operators in the world that deploy it. And if you want LPWAN in an operator setup, probably you're better off with narrowband IoT and LTE-M. Um, so a lot of times when we have strategic meetings or sales calls, and we have people that have still that older notion of LoRaWAN, that it's really kind of like you can go to an operator and get your connectivity. Yeah, that's not correct. What the new world is, or kind of what we see with 3 million connected devices, is that it's really easy to implement your own LoRaWAN network by bringing in a gateway with easy backhaul connectivity, either through cellular or through Wi-Fi, and then build your use case on top of that. And that we've made that very scalable in an enterprise setting, making it easy to bring in the network, doing that at a very low cost, and then building your solution that drives your business case. So I think a lot of time we have to explain people like, yeah, I mean, this is really where LoRaWAN is catching on, and we call that LP LAN more than LP WAN because this is basically a better term for where LoRaWAN is very successful right now, and that's really where the business is. And for smart metering, I also call that an LP LAN because basically it's a dedicated private network for and maybe a bit of a larger area, but it's always made specifically, for instance, for that metering case or another use case.
So let me ask you then about private LoRaWAN networks. So this is something that's becoming more common. What are the benefits for enterprises choosing this path over public or maybe hybrid networks?
Yeah, so a private LoRaWAN network is basically like a Wi-Fi network. You install it in a building, in a neighborhood, or on a farm, and basically you get to install the network, you get to own the network, and you get to decide what devices run on it, and you can optimize that network for your use case. And as I just said, this is really where LoRaWAN shines because you have all these components off the shelf, and you just have to configure it in a way that that the kind of use case that you built the network for basically is optimized, right? So and the majority of the market of LoRaWAN now consists of devices that run on private networks, and that's just the way forward. What we've done is to make sure that it's really easy to manage that private network because if you kind of like build a network yourself, that also brings in some responsibilities and some risk. So what we've created is network management software that easily from the cloud you can launch your own network at your gateways, at your devices, and off you go.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask you kind of along those same lines, if you're talking about a successful private LoRaWAN deployment, what that looks like, best practices, advice you should share for people maybe listening to this?
Yeah, so I think there's one clear data point. I think what we've learned over the last 10 years, that is the one criteria to success, is that if you uh, kind of are an expert in a certain niche, for instance, in smart building setting or in a retail setting or in a certain like type of food compliance, the more you're expert, business expert in that niche, the more you're successful you're going to be in the IoT implementation of it. Because I've seen a lot of startups and ideas coming on. It's like people that come from IT, they come from the inventors kind of perspective, and then they think they know market, and then all of a sudden they get into the politics and the dynamics, and they don't know the trade secrets, they don't know the shows where to go to, and then they run out of money, and then it stops. Well, if we've, for instance, seen experts that have been in the industry for 30 years, they know all the people there, they know all the trade secrets, they know all the shows in distant locations where you would never figure out that you could do business. And if they adopt IoT, and these things are coming together, just as I said, is that the risk of running a LoRaWAN project becomes lower because we have all these off-the-shelf components. If you bring in your domain knowledge, all of a sudden you're going to have a successful concept. And I think it's us as industry that needs to make sure that our components are more kind of like plug and play and just easy to use, and they work at scale. And in the end, the companies and the people that are going to be successful with IoT, they're not going to be successful with IoT because they do IoT. No, they're going to be successful because they really know their business.
How do you see all this evolving kind of on the private network side? Like, do you think more companies will treat LoRaWAN infrastructure as strategic internal assets? Like, how do you think this all just kind of grows on that front?
I think we're really experiencing. I think if you look at our growth numbers, we now have 3 million devices connected to our software, and it's growing around 50 to 60% year on year. So what I just see is that the order of magnitude is increasing, right? Like, so we're not talking about we have around 1,000 customers, so we're not talking about thousands, but we're talking about tens of thousands. We even a customer that's growing into a million cents. So um, what we've seen kind of like is that there's much more trust in the technology, and it's basically going through this Gartner hype curve, right? Like we've been through the hype, we hit rock bottom, and now we're going to what they call this plateau of productivity. Um, and it's really clear that we're there because we see customers growing, and we see the amount of customers growing. Um, and this is all people that figure out, hey, what, like we had these IT people playing around kind of somewhere in a corner for 10 years, and we tried it once or twice and it really didn't satisfy us. And I think if you go in now, yeah, you just find out that it this time it will work, and it is really maturing in that sense.
When we talk about interoperability, like what role does that play in private LoRaWAN deployments, especially across maybe large global organizations?
Yeah, so what we have is we also offer an enterprise version of our software, and that's very popular with people, with companies that have global footprints, because one day they run the network management software in their private cloud, in their own environment, and then across, for instance, let's say many industrial size, or we have a customer which is in retail, and they have retail. Um, Shops and supermarkets across the world. So for these enterprise customers, they now can also implement all the governance and control they have to do from their IT department, run it on their private cloud, and then basically have it almost as an IoT shared service center, offering IoT services to all their divisions across the world. So it's really interesting how this all plays out, and yeah, how kind of, because we have this diverse way of offering LoRaWAN. Yeah, we have the Fortune 500 companies that maybe like deploy this on 50 industrial sites across the world. And then we have maybe smaller systems integrator that have like 100 sites or maybe 100 fast food restaurants from a franchisee, right? So um, it's really interesting. It's basically starts to be more compliant with how IT procurement and implementations are done.
Yeah, that makes total sense how that would kind of align there. Where do you see the biggest hurdles for enterprises when they're looking to scale, even adopt LoRaWAN based solutions? Like, what are the things that stick out to you most in the conversations that you have that are worth maybe talking through here?
I think one of the biggest challenges is in the end always the physical installation. So that's it's something a bit out of the control of technology companies like us. So I think that's always a challenge, and that's always something to look out for and to plan ahead. In the end, it's not it will be done, right? That's not, but it's always something that probably is a challenge. I think the other one is what we sometimes see is if there needs to be an alignment in IT maturity. So if your entire company like isn't on the digital transformation bandwagon and you're coming in with like a very sophisticated sensor solution, you're gonna hit a wall. You're gonna say, hey, I've all this like I've set up this project, I set up this POC. You're gonna go pitch it internally or you're gonna pitch it to corporate, they're not gonna figure it out. If you have a company that already, for instance, adopted some level of low code, no code, or they have already innovators, they have proper DevOps internally, if you then kind of come in with the IoT ideas that like you're aligned, you're speaking on the same level because here, if you already have somebody at corporate that basically has incentives to increase the data governance of the company or improve operations through data, then basically you're gonna help them get promotion because you're coming in with some interesting sensor solutions. So I think these are really if- these really practical things that are really generic to generic IT and digital success in a company. Um, so yeah, that's I think these are at the moment these are the biggest hurdles.
So let me ask, as we wrap up here, thinking about where we are now, where we're going with LoRaWAN use cases, what are the ones that you feel like will kind of explode over the next 2 to 3 years that people really aren't talking about yet? We've obviously mentioned a few on the in the conversation here today. There are a lot that have kind of been I guess, the mainstay when it comes to just general deployments that companies are thinking about with these technologies in the IoT space. But is there something that maybe you all are seeing kind of glimpses of that, hey, this is actually an area that's maybe a little more untapped, that we see a lot of potential as maturity continues to mature and more adoption increases, things like that?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and so it's kind of where's the growth? The reality is that if we look at our base, it's very fragmented across a lot of different domains. But to give an answer, at least this is I think definitely in building management, retail, restaurants, anything that requires compliance that requires physical activities, food compliance, temperature logging, temperature, humidity. Um, uh, Even the companies that are using to monitor lifts and kind of all these kind of small things. Um, yeah, and then in water metering, I think water metering is a very clear market. It's also a very competitive market, but I think one of the things that LoRaWAN brings is there's also a very strong ecosystem there, and it kind of like the where LoRaWAN really shines is what we see in water metering projects of like 10 to 100K water meters. Um, because that's a really kind of like interesting segment where it's actually too small to build an entire proprietary solution. So if you're gonna roll out 10 million water meters, you have so much money, you're gonna build your own entire stack extremely optimized for your geography, for like exactly what you want. If you have a project of 30 to 40,000 water meters, you don't have the additional budget to do everything yourself. You have to go to the market, and this is where LoRaWAN provides a really good. And this is what we see as well. We have many customers across the world, yeah, in many places, Americas, Europe, Southeast Asia that are using our software for water metering. So yeah, these are two interesting points.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, kind of to that point, you have 2.4 million plus devices on your network. What's next for you all? What's next for the things industries? Like, what should people be looking for? What should they be excited about? What's the plan?
Yeah, so basically what we try to do is just to make sure that IT is not the reason why your project fails. And we basically look always at kind of what issues our customers looking at, and we're looking at our support tickets. So one of the things that we saw people still struggling with is for instance is a very easy we're looking for a very easy way to set up a LoRaWAN network. So last year we created a vertically integrated LoRaWAN gateway. Basically, you order it. There's a integrated SIM card. It costs you $6 a month. It costs $150, and basically we ship it to you. It's already provisioned to your network management software, and it works if you plug it into power. There's no additional charges, so it's like a cellular Verizon AT&T that works. So that's one. And furthermore, is like we're looking at yeah, increasing all kinds of um, integration possibilities to make sure that basically on the side of where you integrate us into your IT systems, there's really very little struggles, and it's really easy to basically use LoRaWAN as a plugin because in the end, that's what we are, right? We are you have a broader digital transformation strategy, broader digital or data strategy, and what we're just bringing in some telemetry data, and what we need to do is to make sure that gives you the least of headache as possible.
You don't, like you said at the beginning, you don't want to be the reason anything fails or the reason they kind of are not able to achieve what they're looking for sure, for sure. I guess people listening to this, where can they learn more about the things industry? How can they get involved in the LoRaWAN community? Anything else that's worth mentioning kind of before we wrap up?
I think like last thing I wanted to mention is one thing that's to your previous question. One thing that's really growing is the enterprise version. So companies completely taking control of a sensor solution, and in the market, I think LoRaWAN comes in with a unique proposition that you can like on your private cloud or your own managed cloud or your own data center even within your corporate, you can build a LoRaWAN network and just have it kind of completely integrated. Yeah, if you want to reach out to us, the thingsindustries.com, or you will look me up on LinkedIn. I'm always present there. We also have a big user event every year. It's now the 23rd and 24th of September. It's a great event in Amsterdam where we're going to talk about LoRaWAN, IoT. But yeah, we are basically talking about the entire IoT stack there this year. And yeah, there's going to be 1,500 people from all across the world. That's the Things Conference, which we do once a year. And yeah, these are kind of like, that's really a great place that if you want to explore LoRaWAN or kind of like generic IoT stacks, it's a really great place to go.
Thank you, Vivek, again for taking the time to chat. It's always a pleasure. Always love having you. We'll have to check in again maybe later this year, see how things are going. And yeah, just talk about kind of the evolution of the space because it continues to grow. You all are doing some pretty fantastic things that I want to make sure our audience is always kind of, I guess, privy to and understands how great it is, how impactful it is. So thanks again for your time.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this opportunity.